Hi, I'm Alice. I own a $30 million luxury spa chain. But to my mom, I'm still just a failed nail tech. She tells people I'm between jobs. She set up a nail salon interview for me, and at my parents' anniversary party, I wasn't even allowed to speak. They praise my siblings like royalty, while I sit invisible in a room I helped pay for. Then came the fake job application, the ruined deal, the rumors of bankruptcy, started by my own brother. And now my sister? She's trying to steal my investors. How did it get this far? Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday, until it became a parade of polite humiliation, wrapped in gravy and green bean casserole. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' home in Austin just before noon. The house hadn't changed since I left for Arizona a decade ago. Same red brick, same overgrown rose bushes my mom always said she'd trim. I sat in my Genesis for a minute, fingers curled tight around the steering wheel. My heart thudded, not from nerves exactly, just the quiet dread of being treated like someone I no longer was. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey clung to every corner. My sister Celeste greeted me with a wide, camera-ready smile. "There she is," she said, patting my shoulder like I was a stray cat. "Still doing nails out west, huh?" I blinked, smiled like I didn't just get slapped in the face. "Hi, Celeste. Happy Thanksgiving." Tobias, my cousin, chimed in from the living room. "You still using glitter polish on old ladies in Scottsdale? Or have you upgraded to eyebrow threading?" Chuckles rippled through the room. I felt every eye glance past me, not at me. They didn't mean to be cruel. That was the worst part. Dinner was a buffet of passive-aggressive commentary. My uncle bragged about his real estate portfolio. Celeste announced her promotion. Again. I stayed quiet, chewing on my stuffing and swallowing down words far heavier. Then came the moment I should have expected. My mother, Lorelei, raised her wineglass and smiled my way. "Alice has always been so artistic. She still does nails, right? In Arizona?" A silence fell just long enough to sting. Tobias burst out laughing. "Hey, art's art, even if it's on toes." I didn't flinch. I just raised my own glass, smiled back and said, "Something like that." After dessert, Mom pulled me aside near the fridge, her voice syrupy sweet. "Honey, I met a lovely woman at the market. Her daughter owns a nail salon downtown. They're hiring. I told her you'd stop by Monday." I stared at her. My ears rang. She kept going. "It's a good location. You'd get walk-ins. And stability. Finally. 12 spas, 5 states, $30 million in annual revenue. But to her, I was still the girl who painted glitter stars on her teenage cousin's toes at Christmas. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked outside. The stars were beginning to pierce through the sky, soft and cold. I wrapped my arms around myself and exhaled slowly. She never even asked what I do. She just assumed. And tonight, something inside me cracked. The invitation came in the mail 2 weeks later, all gold foil edges and cursive script. "Join us in celebrating Lorelei and Alaric Wynn's 40th wedding anniversary." Celeste's name was printed at the bottom as event coordinator, of course. I stared at it for a long minute before setting it aside on the counter. I almost didn't go. I thought about skipping it entirely, sending flowers instead. But then I imagined their smiles, the toasts, the speeches, and my empty chair. That would have been too easy for them. I needed to be there, if only to remind myself why I kept my success to myself. The event hall shimmered with crystal chandeliers and velvet runners. Everything about it screamed money. I wore a navy sheath dress, simple, elegant, not flashy, but far from invisible. I walked in just as Celeste was directing the waitstaff. She barely looked at me before returning to her checklist. Tobias was already holding court at the bar, retelling some exaggerated story about a business deal in Miami. "Closed in 2 days. They begged me to take their money," he boasted. As I passed a group of ants near the floral arch, I caught the tail end of a sentence. "Celeste's new promotion will put her over 6 figures, so proud." No one mentioned me, not even in passing. I smiled, nodded when spoken to, asked polite questions. No one asked what I was working on, not even once. After dinner, the lights dimmed and the MC stepped up. "Now, a few heartfelt words from the Wynn children," he announced with practiced warmth. "Please welcome Celeste and Tobias." My name was never mentioned. Celeste took the mic first, glowing with self-importance. Mom and Dad taught me that hard work and polish open every door. I wouldn't be where I am without their example. She turned slightly, smiling toward the table where I sat, as if my existence were a decorative afterthought. Then Tobias launched into a story about a family vacation where I supposedly cried over a broken nail kit. Guess she knew early she'd be a beauty guru, he quipped. Laughter erupted. My champagne glass remained untouched. After the crowd moved toward dessert, I cornered Mom near the bathrooms. Why wasn't I included in the speech lineup? She looked genuinely puzzled. Sweetheart, you're still figuring things out. Let the others speak first. You'll have your moment. I didn't argue. What would have been the point? Later that night, back home in Scottsdale, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like distant answers I didn't have yet. My mind wasn't swirling anymore. It was sharp, focused. If I wanted them to see me, I'd have to stop pretending I was small. I'd have to let them see exactly what I'd built and who they'd ignored all these years. They didn't forget me. They just never saw me to begin with. The email hit my inbox just after sunrise, while I was sipping black coffee and reviewing the Q1 rollout strategy for Etherea's Chicago branch. Thank you for your interest in joining the Glam and Glow sales team. We're excited to invite you for an interview. My stomach flipped. I hadn't applied anywhere. I scrolled down. The attached resume had my name, my old Arizona address, and a stripped-down version of my early career. Internships, retail jobs, even a typo in the summary. The cover letter was the giveaway. My daughter is looking for structure and stability. She's personable, creative, and eager to rejoin the workforce. Lorelei. The contact number was hers. I didn't slam my mug down or scream. I didn't reply or call. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove. Past the city limits, past the boutique hotels and cactus-lined roads. I didn't have a destination. I just needed motion, silence. Eventually, I pulled into a viewpoint above the valley. I sat there, letting the engine tick cool and the morning sun bake the windshield. And I thought about those years in Los Angeles, renting a studio so small the kitchen doubled as my desk, working front desk at a gym by day, waitressing at night, taking business classes in between, pitching spa concepts to anyone who'd listen, and plenty who didn't. I thought about how I met Dorian, how we built Etheria from nothing. I thought about our first real investor meeting, how I wore thrifted heels and didn't blink when asked if I could run a business as a woman in wellness. Every moment had been intentional, every step earned, and still, my own mother saw me as someone who needed a part-time job folding towels at a beauty counter. When I finally drove home, the sun was setting behind the mountains. I walked into my condo and dropped my purse by the door. No music, no lights, just me and the view from the glass balcony. I stood in front of the wall where I'd hung every major milestone. The framed certificate from our first grand opening, the article in Spa and Beauty Monthly, the award for top female entrepreneur under 40. And still, she thinks I'm lost. She applied for a job for me. The words came out before I even heard the door open. Dorian stood in the hallway, frozen, a takeout bag in hand. He set the food down, walked over. You're kidding. I shook my head. His jaw tightened. You need to stop letting them write your story. He was right. But first, I needed to decide how mine would be told. I booked the flight to Dallas 2 days after the job application incident. The invitation came from Celeste, some upscale networking mixer with selective industry elites. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered. But something about her timing felt calculated, and I needed to know what game she was playing. I arrived at the event just after sunset, dressed in a clean-lined black dress with no logo, no sparkle, and no need to explain itself. The venue was full of clinking glasses and curated introductions. Everyone's handshake had an agenda. Celeste was already on stage, part of a Women in Business panel. Her blowout was perfect, her voice syrupy. I took a seat in the back corner, blending in like I always had at family events, seen but not centered. She smiled toward the crowd. A lot of young dreamers think opening a wellness spa is easy. Throw in a few candles, some eucalyptus, and voila, entrepreneur. Polite chuckles followed. Especially in places like Arizona, she added, eyes glinting as she sipped her wine. It wasn't a joke, it was a jab, and everyone around me laughed like they understood something I didn't. I stayed still. My glass remained in hand, untouched. My fingers curled around the stem just enough to steady the fury crawling up my spine. Later, I spotted her leaning against the bar, laughing a little too loud, flirtatiously tossing her hair while chatting with a tall man in a tailored gray suit. She didn't recognize him. She didn't realize she was speaking to Dorian. I watched from a distance as she leaned in. Do you know much about spa logistics? I'm thinking of starting something similar. Just, cleaner, classier. Dorian's smile was unreadable. He nodded, let her ramble about branding issues, and those amateur spots that confuse polish with profit. She didn't stop talking. She didn't ask questions. She had no idea he was the COO of the very company she was subtly degrading. When he walked back to me, he passed a champagne flute into my hand. She's clueless, he whispered. She thinks she's the smartest one in the room. I nodded, lips tight. Good, let her think that. Because now, the wheels were turning. By the time we left the venue, we had a plan. Etherea's New York expansion would go public next month, with press coverage, a luxury campaign, and full executive exposure. If Celeste wanted to play businesswoman, she'd better prepare for a front-row seat to what a real empire looked like. She just declared war. And I'm ready to show her exactly who she picked to fight with. I was back at Etheria HQ, standing in the center of the glass-walled war room, when Dorian rushed in with his phone still pressed to his ear. Greg pulled out, he said, eyes wide. He's walking away from the resort contract. I blinked. What? He said something changed, something personal. Dorian's voice dropped. Call him. I locked myself in my office and dialed Greg's number. He picked up on the second ring, his tone awkward, too cheerful. Alice, hey, look, I didn't want to make things complicated. Your mom reached out after Thanksgiving. She mentioned you were between jobs, freelancing a bit. I didn't want to add pressure. I closed my eyes, pressing a hand to my chest like I could keep my ribs from cracking open. Between jobs? Yeah, I thought she'd know best, Greg muttered. She said you needed space. Greg, I run a company with over 200 employees. Silence. I'm sorry, he said. I truly thought. I know, I cut in. Thanks for your time. I hung up and stared at the city beyond my office window. $7 million. Gone. Just like that. Because my mother couldn't utter the words, my daughter is a CEO. The next morning I got in my car and drove. 8 hours, no stops. When I walked into her kitchen, she was slicing fruit like nothing had happened. You talked to Greg? I asked quietly. She looked up, surprised but not guilty. Yes, lovely man. Why? You told him I was unemployed. I didn't say unemployed. I said you were freelancing. I didn't want to put pressure on you. You cost me $7 million, she scoffed. Oh, Alice, you always exaggerate. I was just being honest. You jump around so much. I never know what exactly you do. I exhaled through my nose, steady. I build empires, Mom. Quietly, because you never bothered to ask. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. That was the worst part. I walked to the door, keys already in hand. If you can't see me for who I am, maybe I stop showing up altogether. She called my name, but I didn't turn back. Back in Scottsdale, I opened my phone, scrolled to her contact, and pressed block. You want silence? Here it is. I let them talk over me for years, but if they keep pushing, I'll make sure they finally hear me. The silence I gave her wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary, a long overdue line drawn in stone. 3 mornings later, I was back on her doorstep. No warning, no smile. Just the sound of my heels on her porch and the door opening like it always did. Like I still belonged. She blinked in surprise, tightening her robe. Alice? I stepped inside, straight to the kitchen table, and pulled out a chair. My voice was even. 12 locations, 5 states, over 300 employees, annual valuation just past 30 million. She didn't sit. She stood there, arms folded, like the truth was something impolite. I continued. We've been featured in Forbes, Vogue Wellness, and Business Today. I've spoken at 3 national conferences, and the only reason you didn't know is because you never cared to ask. Celeste appeared at the hallway, barefoot and eavesdropping. That's cute, she smirked. You memorized your LinkedIn bio. Then Tobias walked in, finishing a banana like he owned the floor. Fake numbers don't impress real businessmen, Alice. I stared at him, deadpan. I've done more in 10 years than you'll manage in your lifetime. But by all means, keep flapping your gums. Lorelei finally sat, her eyes wide but her lips shut. Keep doubting me, I said, standing now. It'll make watching what's next a lot more satisfying. I left before anyone could respond. No drama, no grand exit, just precision. 2 days later, Dorian dropped a name into my office like a warning. Marcus Adler. I froze. Investor? Used to be. Said Tobias told him you were bankrupt. Said you lost everything in crypto, your company's a front, and you're under investigation. I didn't even blink. I opened my laptop, forwarded every screenshot my network had already collected, group texts, LinkedIn DMs, even a voicemail. I attached them to a formal legal letter and addressed it to Tobias's hedge fund's legal department. Subject line, defamation. First and only warning. I copied HR for good measure. A few hours later, my LinkedIn profile lit up with unusual traffic. Recruiters, reporters, even wellness bloggers. I didn't panic. I smiled. They're poking the bear, I whispered, and I'm done playing nice. If they want war, they better be ready for the woman they've spent a decade underestimating. The notification hit at 5:12 a.m. A text from one of my PR team. You'll want to see this before it spreads further. Attached was a blog post from a mid-tier wellness site. Nothing mainstream, but fast-growing. Headline: The Polished Lie. One insider's account of Etheria spas. It read like a manifesto from someone with a vendetta. Claims that I never earned my credentials, that my staff were underpaid, that our leadership was style over substance. It quoted an anonymous source who described me as obsessed with aesthetics, allergic to reality. I sat up, phone clutched like a blade. Minutes later, the article was already being retweeted by influencers in the wellness space. Hashtags like #HashFraudInWellness began popping up. Dorian walked in with coffee. He took one look at my face, set the mug down slowly. They're not holding back anymore. No, I said. They aren't. We alerted PR. A calm, professional statement went out within 2 hours. We categorically deny the claims in this anonymous piece. Our team remains proud of our work, and our values stand firm. But I knew this wasn't just an article. It was planted. Later that afternoon, I drove to my father's house. I needed one ally left in that family, just one. But as I stepped through the threshold, I heard her voice before I saw her. Spa meets finance, scaled but boutique. I'm calling it Aura. Celeste, pitching Dad, in his office, using my blueprint with a different name and a little lavender twist. I stood in the doorway, silent, watching him nod, slowly, arms crossed, but eyes interested. $250,000, she said. Just the seed. I'll double it by Q2. I stepped in. You're funding her now? Dad looked at me, startled. Alice. Celeste turned with a smirk. Oh, hi. Just giving him options. That's what good daughters do, right? I ignored her. You think my reputation's shaky, so you're putting your chips on her? He didn't speak. That was worse than yelling. I stared at him, then at her. If you invest in her, I said quietly, don't bother showing up when we cut the ribbon in Manhattan. No one stopped me as I walked out. Time to end this, on my terms, in front of everyone. The Morrison and Keene boardroom looked exactly how I expected. Glass walls, polished steel accents, a skyline view worth 7 digits. I stood behind the mirrored partition, arms crossed, watching Celeste work the room. She was in full performance mode, tailored blush suit, crisp slideshow, fake humility. This is more than just wellness, she declared. It's about elegance, accessibility, and empowerment. That's why I'm calling it Celestia, something that elevates. The partners nodded politely. She had rehearsed this. I recognized half the buzzwords from my own early pitches, except she was pitching them back to me. One of the board members tapped a pen against his notepad. Thank you, Miss Wynne. Before we continue, we'd like to loop in one more interested party. Celeste's brow twitched. Excuse me? I stepped into the room, black suit, hair slicked, folder in hand. Her jaw didn't drop, but her hands curled slightly on the table. What are you doing here? I smiled as I pulled up a chair. You're not pitching to Morrison and Keene, you're pitching to Etheria Spas, and I'm the one who signs those deals. Silence. I opened the folder, laid out our expansion map, East Coast schedule, revenue growth, 12 locations, national brand recognition, Forbes Wellness Empire to watch. Celeste didn't blink, but the pink in her cheeks deepened. You've been sitting on this. No, I corrected. I've been building it. She reached for her water glass, but her hand shook. You don't have to humiliate me? This isn't humiliation, I said coolly. This is what happens when you try to take shortcuts through someone else's mountain. The lead investor cleared his throat. Miss Celeste, thank you, but we'll be continuing with our original agreement. By the time I stepped into the reception afterward, the press release was live. Etheria Spas partners with Morrison and Keene to launch luxury flagship in Manhattan. Champagne flutes clinked around me. Dorian joined my side. Across the room, Celeste stood frozen, her smile sharp but her eyes blank. I turned to her, raised my glass slightly. This was just the soft landing. I could have crushed you. The sky over Manhattan was steel blue, streaked with early sun, and I was already dressed before my alarm buzzed. Today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about pride. It was about arrival. From the penthouse suite overlooking Fifth Avenue, I could see the awning of our flagship Etheria Spa. Cameras were being set up, velvet ropes pulled tight. The city moved around me, fast and sharp, but I felt still. A soft knock on the door broke the quiet. Someone's here, my assistant whispered. Says she won't stay long. I opened the door and found my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup. A black coat she clutched like armor. I won't make a scene, she said, voice almost steady. I just wanted to say you did it, and I didn't help. That's on me. No tears, no justification, just that. I nodded, unsure if I could speak without breaking. Later, when I stood at the podium, a sea of reporters and cameras aimed at me, I didn't talk about wealth or vision. I talked about belonging. I built this not because I was encouraged, but because I wasn't. Sometimes the empire comes after the war, and sometimes the war is being told you're too small to try. The crowd clapped, but I only looked at the front row, where my mother sat silently. She didn't stand, she didn't cheer, but she wiped a tear with her thumb and held my gaze. Afterward, I caught a glimpse of Alaric nodding politely before slipping away. Celeste hovered by the exit, pretending not to watch. Tobias never showed. Before Mom left, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. Inside, it read, I'm proud of you, even if I never said it right. Back in my suite, I poured myself a drink and stared out at the city I'd claimed. Closure doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and this one whispered, Enough. I may carry the scars, but I earned every one of them, and they're mine. Maybe your family never clapped for you. Maybe they didn't believe in your dreams, or they mistook your silence for weakness. I've lived that. And what I've learned is this. You don't need their applause to build something extraordinary. You just need to believe in it enough to keep going when no one else sees the vision but you. I spent years proving I was more than their assumptions. Not because I needed their approval, but because I finally understood I deserved my own. And if you're out there fighting a quiet battle, in your career, your home, your heart, let me tell you this. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep the peace. Speak, build, be seen, and now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? What would you say if you finally had the mic? Tell me in the comments, even just drop a 1 if this story hit home. Or tell me what city you're watching from so we can connect. And if it didn't resonate, that's okay too. Let me know why and what kind of stories do speak to you. I read every comment, and your voice matters here. If this video moved you even a little, please tap that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. There's more to tell, and I'd love for you to be here when we do.